I'd been recommended a wine bar called Trabuxu by a Maltese friend. It's in one of the streets that goes down to the sea, he said. It turns out that this was a Maltese joke because every road in Valletta leads to the sea. The Maltese capital is one of the smallest in Europe, crammed onto a peninsula just 1 kilometer long. The city was built over the course of around 250 years from 1566 onwards, constructed largely out of honey-colored limestone. Architecturally it's very harmonious, with green balconies adding a flash of color against the warm stone. Sitting alongside these homegrown aesthetics are red post and telephone boxes, a legacy of Malta's 150 years as a British colony. Within its fortifications, churches, palaces, domestic buildings, and the so-called auberges of the Knights of St. John are all jumbled together. The Knights of St. John are inextricably linked with Malta and their story permeates every corner of the city. The Hospitaller Order was founded in Jerusalem in 1070 to care for pilgrims and soldiers wounded in the Crusades, but as Muslim forces took over the Holy Land and Eastern Mediterranean, the Knights had to retreat to Cyprus, Rhodes and finally Malta in 1530. Malta was then part of the Spanish Empire. The Knights were invited to settle on the island by Charles V, who hoped they would counter the threat of the Ottoman navy. The Knights weren't enchanted by the poorly defended, barren island, and the local inhabitants weren't delighted by the guests imposed on them either. Led by Jean Parisot de Vallette, the Knights, based in Fort St. Angelo on what is now the Grand Harbour, set about fortifying the place, just in time for the Great Siege of 1565 when the Knights and Maltese soldiers withstood overwhelming forces for 4 months until the Turkish navy was vanquished on September 8, now celebrated as Victory Day. The Knights of St. John, at first resented on Malta, were now the saviors of Europe. And so started the building of Valletta, the first planned city in Europe, named after the hero of the siege. St. John's Co-Cathedral, built in the 16th century, stands close to the center of the peninsula on which Valletta was built. It became the location for all the religious ceremonies of the Knights, who are drawn from some of Europe's most illustrious Catholic families. Even if you can't attend a concert, visit for the glowing interior, the colored marble floor and the oratory with its beheading of St. John the Baptist by Caravaggio. It's a disturbing painting, as if you've stumbled on the execution halfway through as John's head is pushed to the floor and the executioner holds the knife for the final cut. It's the only painting Caravaggio ever signed, in the blood oozing from St. John's throat. Malta endured another siege in the Second World War, with 3,000 bombing raids from 1940 to 1942. In 1942, George VI awarded the George Cross to the entire population of Malta, and in 1943 Franklin D. Roosevelt sent a message of gratitude from the American people. Malta stood alone but unafraid in the center of the sea, he said. UNESCO declared Valletta a World Heritage Site in 1980, describing it as one of the most concentrated historic areas in the world, and next year it's taking up the mantle of European Capital of Culture, something the city has worked towards for years. One example is the new City Gate and Parliament building created by Renzo Piano in 2014. They are angular, contemporary structures, but ones that complement rather than distract from Valletta's fortifications and predominantly Baroque architecture. Then, there's the city's music. The Valletta International Baroque Festival first took place in 2013. Festivals typically take 5 years to establish themselves, so this one was designed to have the 5th edition under its belt before it launches the Capital of Culture celebrations in January. We are extremely lucky to have a self-contained tiny little city like this, says artistic director of the festival, Kenneth Zamittabona. The springboard is this 18th-century theater. The festival offices are in the Teatro Manuel, which had its first show in 1732. The horseshoe-shaped auditorium seats around 600. The music that opens the festival, Vivaldi's Four Seasons, performed by the Concerto Colne, was composed only a decade before the theater was built. There are also operatic works by the French composer Rameau performed during the festival dating from the 1730s. Most of the Baroque festival performances take place in Valletta's many churches, and hearing top groups playing in such an environment is completely different from a concert hall. The most spectacular venue is the St. John's Co-Cathedral, with its vaulted interior covered in paintings and gold leaf. The Cathedral of St. Paul, meanwhile, is located inland in the walled city of Medina, hosts performances. Straight Street, where I eventually find Trabuxu, is more like an alleyway. Once home to Malta's equivalent of a red light district, it's now popular for its bars and restaurants, smartened up for the forthcoming Capital of Culture celebrations. Even in winter people sit out after the concerts, sipping local wine from the San Nicola vineyards and listening to the footsteps echoing down narrow, nighttime streets. This January, as this city kicks off a spectacular year of entertainment, I'm inclined to join them. Details Valletta. The Valletta International Baroque Festival runs from January 13-27, 2018. Concerts are booked individually, with tickets ranging from €20 to €80. Valletta is hosting numerous events as part of its tenure as European Capital of Culture 2018. EasyJet flies from Gatwick to Malta from £50 return.